What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to do what could hopefully be the biggest and best video we've ever done on this channel, looking back at Life is Strange. 10-year anniversary, one of the most special games to me of all time, a top 5 game. I've never actually ranked my top list, but if I were to, this has to be somewhere in that 3 to 5 range. The game is a masterpiece. The game is so special, and it really did impact me. It stuck with me, and it's one of those games that you can just never forget about. You know, when you think about a game and you say, well, what's a game that if you could just forget about the first time you played it and played it for the first time again, what would that game be? This is a game that comes to the very top of many people's lists. It's just that impactful. So I replayed it. Now, in terms of when you guys are watching this, I actually replayed this game to get ready for double exposure. That's when I'm recording this. You're seeing it months and months and months later because I wanted to line it up with the 10-year anniversary, but I wanted the memory because I'm fresh off of it, right? I replayed it. I put about 11, 12 hours, and I did everything. I platinumed it. I already platinumed the original game, so I have 2 platinums now because I platinumed the remaster. Platinumed it, talked to everybody, looked at every object, picked up every notepad, picked up anything you could do in this game. I really try to do and soak it in. And I come away, again, thinking it's a masterpiece. I take a little bit, something a little bit different each time I play this game, right? It's just so freaking good. We're going to try to talk about all of it. I recorded myself playing the entire thing, so I got plenty of footage, episodes 1 through 5. So what I want to do first, I just want to show you kind of what I got, right? So the game came out, of course, January 30th of 2015. That was episode 1. You could actually get it as a season pass, which is what I did. Remember, you could get it actually, I think, discounted. It was maybe $5 per episode, or you could get it, I think, for $20 for the whole game. What a goddamn steal, right? $20 to just play one of the greatest games of all time. So I did that, and I knew immediately that this game was going to be special. We'll talk about that in a second. Then they came out with the collector's edition. I think they literally call it limited edition, right? And I had to get it. Even back then, I said, this is a special game that, I have it digitally, but I got to support it whenever I can. So I got a few things to show you. Number 1 is the limited edition, of course, PS4. I only think, this is a blast from the past, right? Comes with Deus Ex, another franchise that's just been neglected to hell. Of course, the disc, but super great because while I love this backdrop here, this right here is just iconic, right? In terms of like the glare or whatever you want to call this, right? And just the iconic photo of Max with her hand up. So freaking amazing. But it wasn't just that, right? It comes with a little bit of a kind of diary journal, lots of pictures, lots of all sorts of stuff in this thing, right? And you got that. I keep this actually with my games, and I think I almost convinced myself at one point. I think memories and time. Just so freaking good. So freaking good. This is in pretty pristine, nice and like rock solid. You can probably beat somebody pretty hard with that one. And then, of course, and this one I cracked it a little bit. That's my mistake, but I'll never sell it. Of course, the soundtrack. And I love it. I love seeing this in the game. I believe it's episode 4 when you're going through with Chloe and you can open stuff up and she's in bed and you can see this. I think at least it's episode 4. It might be 3. And of course you got the back. Again, it's a little bit broken. Yeah, I really hate it. I hate it, but of course it's got this. So good, though. We're going to talk about the music because the music in this game is 10 out of 10. I think of Kingdom Hearts when I think of like soundtracks. I think the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack might be my favorite, period. And really, that's what I always go back to. If I'm trying to just listen to music, just like the ambient kind of, theme, I listen to Kingdom Hearts, whether it's Simple and Clean or, Sanctuary, or just the piano, like the opening menu of Kingdom Hearts, maybe say 2. But for Life is Strange, this is another one. I could listen to the main menu, and I think it might be the Max and Chloe theme, or maybe those are 2 different things. But I could listen to, there's like a 10-hour loop of it on YouTube. I play that quite often. I don't even know how many hours I've actually sunk into it. It's just great music to hear in the background. All right, the game comes out, right? Now, I've told this story a few times, but this is the place to tell it. So I see the trailer, right? There's a trailer for the game, as there are many games. And I remember telling my cousin, and I think this is a great story because I think it shows that I saw a lot of potential in this very early. That's pretty much it. I saw the trailer, and I remember telling my cousin, a few years older than me, and I said, I think this game is going to be something really special. I didn't really know much about it. It came, the trailer was obviously before the game came out. I didn't even have a YouTube channel yet. I just remember thinking, this just looks so freaking cool. I love the idea of time, right? So, I mean, I think they really struck gold with Max's power being time travel, or rewinding and then picture hopping and whatnot, right? So the game comes out, episode 1, and it just blows me away. I think there's something timeless about this game. And while I played the remastered, I know there's actually been debate online where the remastered in some ways is actually worse. The game's visual style. Don't want to spend too much time on visuals because I think there's many more important things to talk about with this game. But the visuals in Life is Strange, I think, are so timeless. And I mean, I played the remastered. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I think the lighting is so beautiful, but and I don't think it's cell shadedness, obviously that looks a little bit different, but there's just something quite unique and something timeless about the way that these characters look. Like, it's somewhat realistic, right? Their mouth kind of, matches the words, but it's also not hyper, like super realistic, where it can kind of stand the test of time. There's a lot of blurriness features, right? Like when you're rewinding time and everything is so bright and so disorienting, you can see like the shadow or outline of the character, say Max, right, as you're going back and forward in time. There's just something where the visuals don't really age, and the game's 10 years old, and does it look 10 years old? I think that visual style is kind of from the era of 10 years ago, because to be quite honest with you, again, I'm recording this video before Double Exposure comes out. We've seen how games like this look nowadays. We've seen Telltale. Telltale had a very similar kind of thing. Go back, and look at The Walking Dead Season 1, even say The Wolf Among Us, right? And then you look at where those games have turned to, and there's still a bit of that style in there, right? You see the trailer for like The Wolf Among Us Season 2, or just Wolf Among Us 2 in general. You can tell it's obviously from the same kind of thread, but it looks different. And I don't know if it looks better. I'll say that honestly. Even Life is Strange Double Exposure, Max looks different. She looks older, right? And there's still that heart. There was the heart in Before the Storm. There was the heart in True Colors in Life is Strange 2. But there's just something very special about the visual style of the characters, of the environment, of the school, of Arcadia Bay. There's just something special about it that I don't really think ever ages. And I think, again, to get down to kind of the nitty-gritty, I think the basic aspect of it is it's not hyper-realistic, right? This is not The Last of Us at that time, or maybe a better example would be, like an Until Dawn. Maybe one day that doesn't look so good. Actually, that day hasn't happened yet, but, this game doesn't rely on Max literally looking like Hannah Tell, right? Like, it doesn't do that, so it can kind of live on forever. So I remember playing episode 1 and just being blown away. And one thing in terms of the background of this game that I want to give credit to, because it's just been lost, honestly, to time, is this game really honored that release schedule. I actually think one time the game was moved up, but they had just such a consistent release. And remember, this was in the era where, Telltale had to do some stuff first to make Life is Strange, the way they released it even a thing. Really, Telltale needed to have The Walking Dead Season 1 in order to continue it. But if you remember back then with Telltale, there wasn't a worse studio at communicating and then actually releasing a game. And to be honest with you, Telltale is still terrible with that because of what we've seen with The Wolf Among Us 2. But I mean, in all honesty, right? That was the era where, like, The Wolf Among Us just got, if you remember, that was like a year before this. Episode 1 comes out, and Episode 2 is like delayed by months. The difference between Episode 1, or distance between Episode 1 and 2, was like 6 months, was like half a year. Life is Strange, I want to say, was every 2 months. It started in January, I think it ended in October, and they kept it just so unbelievably consistent. And I know that's a small thing, and it definitely doesn't matter now when you literally can play the full game, right? You play the remaster, it all comes out, you play this on disc, it's all there. But you think back then, and that's a big part of it. And I don't want to let that go, especially with a retrospective video like this where we're really looking back. There was something very special about waiting. And it's actually why I'm kind of in support still of episodic games. I don't know how a Double Exposure handled and how it was received, right? I'm kind of talking from the past. I'm actually trying to replicate Max Caulfield in a way. But I will tell you, I do prefer that because the anticipation from episodes 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and the endings of these episodes are so unbelievably good. They're 10 out of 10. And it let the internet digest it. It let the internet think about it, and it let the internet kind of speculate as to what's to come. And you can't do that if the full game releases at once. It really, to me, it made the wait between episodes 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and 4 and 5 unreal. Unreal. real. The theories with the homeless woman, right? Is that Max from the future? The theories of, is Rachel and Max the same person? There was a lot. I think Geek Remix was the YouTube channel. They actually did a ton of these theories. But I remember seeing them. I wasn't even big on YouTube. I mean, I live streamed the second episode, and I think I played episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, all on YouTube when I had like 15 subscribers. I mean, I wasn't into it, but I would go on YouTube and all of these theories and all this speculation. And I think that's important to say, because I really think that brought me, like playing this game brings me back to that time. A time where not only is the game just like an unbelievable masterpiece, right? But the anticipation and just everything that went into it was also near perfect. Because of those theories, because of all the speculation of, you remember episode 4? You remember how episode 4 ends? Can you imagine dropping episode 4 like that nowadays and saying, okay, you got to wait now 2 months to then see how it ends? And the internet embraced that back then. It really, really did. And I think that was just such a special part to it. It didn't make Life is Strange. I think the game made it, right? The game is just so good. But I do think the internet and the culture and releasing it episodically and also not messing it up. Again, not to like beat down Telltale when we're talking about Don't Not, I guess, at the time, right? But it felt different because of that era. Because we were used to episodic games having terrible communication. You might get one episode, you might get one 5 months later, then the next month, then 3 months later. That is the insane schedule that Telltale would do. And then this was just, we're going to be consistent, we're going to be very, very good. Not that Telltale wasn't good, they were amazing, but you know what I mean? We're going to try to nail all of these different factors that haven't really all been perfect in the past, and they did. They absolutely did. So I just want to throw it in there because, you know, some of those theories and some of the weights. I remember watching or playing episode 3 and watching, you know, what happened to Chloe. My jaw hit the floor. I was like almost nearly in tears. Like emotionally, I was like, what in God's name did Max just do? And then it's like, okay, see you in a couple months. And you just have to sit there and kind of, you know what I mean? You have to sit there in it and kind of like process the emotions you're feeling, process what just happened, and then start to speculate for episode 4. And you did that every time. Now, to be fair, episode 1 is very much a setup episode, right? That's kind of what I realized upon replaying it, I guess for the 5th time. This is the 5th time I've played it. But again, I recorded myself doing the entire thing so I could kind of remember it. Episode 1 is special and at the same time a setup, right? You get to know Max Caulfield. You get the setup of mainly, I would say, Blackwell. Not even necessarily Arcadia Bay. It's about Victoria. It's about Nathan. It's about Jefferson. It's about just stepping outside of the dorms or the college itself and having people playing around, right? You get to fly the drone if you do things, right? You can talk to Justin. You can talk to Evan and all them. And you just start to get to know people, right? Some of these characters you will talk to 1 or 2 times the entire game, but it does a perfect job, I believe, at starting to establish the world. And that really gets to one of the most important parts of Life is Strange, right? World building, the lore building is so good, and they start immediately. Immediately, right? You're treated to Mark Jefferson's. Well, actually, immediately, you're treated to the lighthouse. You're treated to the storm, and you're like, okay, well, that was kind of weird. Then you get the Nathan and Chloe stuff. Then you just kind of get the surroundings of your environment, which, again, it's mainly at this point of Blackwell. But, you know, just to kind of take that all in, right? I think there's some incredible writing that really needed to start right away because, you know, we're talking about episode 1, but jump ahead a little bit, right? Or actually jump to the very end. It's building the whole time to where you're talking to these people, you're experiencing Blackwell, the rich history, right? Principal Wells and Mrs. Grant and all, you know, all this stuff. You're doing all this stuff and you're building up what it's like being in Arcadia Bay. You hear about the fishing nature of it, right? You hear about the Prescotts kind of buying up these businesses. And so you're building up what your surroundings are. That Max has only been there for a couple months. Then you start to build up this girl that you really don't know much about. It's really interesting, again, to replay it and start at the beginning because it's like you don't know anything about Rachel. Nowadays, you can go back because you know the whole game, and you also know Before the Storm. Same thing with Chloe. At the time, it's like you're treated to very little info on who Chloe is. You know generally, right? You know this is a friend of Max's who, you know, they're pirates and best friends for life, and they distanced themselves. Max left, right? And she cut off communication. She didn't talk. She doesn't even know it is Chloe when Nathan shoots her. That's honestly maybe one of the most ironic parts of the entire game. Nathan kills this girl in a bathroom, and Max reaches out out of instinct to stop it, and then hence the time travel stuff, right? And then later on, does she realize that that was actually Chloe, her best friend? And it's about that rebuilding of this friendship, this sisterhood, this loving kind of relationship, depending on how far you go, right? And you have that. So you have the city or the town or the surrounding area and all the people within, and then you have your best friend. And it starts in episode 1, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and it heavily is implied, by the way, that you're gonna be making that decision. That's something that, in the moment, I never really thought of. In the moment, episode 5 is incredibly divisive because of that ending. But playing it, again, like, we know how it ends. So that's in your head, of course, right? But playing it and really trying to just ignore everything but except for the info that you're taking in. The game is all about themes. It's all about defying destiny, and Chloe, was she supposed to die in that bathroom or not? You save her, and you just unravel this, like, you start something. You start to learn about this Rachel Amber mystery, which we'll talk about, right? You start to learn about that, but it's all about, wow, Chloe really dies a lot. You're constantly having to save Chloe and pull her back. You got the train in episode 2. You got her shooting herself, and I guess that one depends on if you tell her to do certain things, but she can shoot herself, right? You have Jefferson taking her out. She dies multiple times in this game, including the very first time, and it's all about these themes. And I mean, that's just one set of themes. Fate, destiny, defying that stuff, right? The environmental, impacts that has. What about Max as a character? She's very introverted, she's very shy, but she's also, at her heart, I think, a very, very good person. I tried to figure out when playing this game, like, why do I actually like her so much? Because I think Max is one of the greatest game characters we ever gotten, and I think it's relatability. I think she is a very relatable character. She is super awkward. She is super shy. You think about, like, the dancing gif, her in Chloe's bedroom. You think of, like, Shaka Bra. You think of, like, these things that just people don't do, people don't say, but also she just has a really great heart. And you actually see that maybe the most with Kate Marsh, right? She depends on how you play it, but you can kind of always be there for her, and she always kind of knows what to say, even though she is, like, heavily socially awkward. She doesn't talk much. She keeps a lot of things inside her head. Another brilliant part of this game is just so much of it, right? You're going around and she's just constantly thinking to herself. And I don't know, I think she's got a great voice. I think Hannah Telle has a great voice. I also think Hannah Telle basically is Max Caulfield. There really is no difference between the people. If you see how Hannah Telle kind of talks and kind of, like, just moves herself in real life, you can see Max Caulfield in that. I think it was a perfect casting. In the same way, Ashley Birch is Chloe. I'm a Chloe fan. I think she's a good character. She got the short end of the stick, right? Her entire life, maybe not her entire life, maybe like 13, 14 on up, she's had it rough. Same thing for Nathan Prescott. This is a guy who is messed up, and I think he does have a good heart when you really break it down, but he is a troubled kid. He kills Rachel Amber, right? He gets persuaded by Mark Jefferson to kind of become his apprentice, his father-son thing. He is messed up. And he, in a lot of ways, is the villain, especially because you don't know about Mark Jefferson, and you also, for most of the game, think it's Nathan. He is basically the villain. Besides the tornado, incoming, he is the villain of this game. And yet, at his core, and I love that. I think that's what makes this game, again, so special, is they're all deep. Max is kind of a little more simple, but even towards episode 5, right? You go to episode 5 and you say, she's battling a lot of conflict within her, right? When she's going through her nightmare phase and she's talking to herself, a self of hers that I think she left behind in a different timeline is kind of how it's talked about. She's complicated too. Chloe is, she's not just like that, right? It's because of the Williams stuff. Nathan Prescott is not just like that. It's because of the relationship with his dad, and even Victoria Chase. There is a handful of characters that are just so deep, and I think that really actually makes this game stand out versus a lot of, and that's before you even get to Kate Marsh or Mark Jefferson, right? Some incredibly deep and complex, that's the word, complex characters in this game that are also kind of relatable. How many people were either in a Kate Marsh position or know somebody like Kate? You know what I mean? Like, that stuff is not to be joked around with or not to be messed with. And I mean, I can understand it enough. I guess I can't relate to it. I can relate maybe a little bit, but obviously not all the way to where Kate goes, right? I mean, this game deals with a lot of complex themes. And again, to the core of, like, what makes this game special, well, it's actually like 1,000 different things, but it's got an amazing main character. It's got these themes of time and this murder mystery. It's literally a murder mystery because you're trying to figure out, or I guess it's just a mystery in general, right? what happened to Rachel Amber? Is she still around? In episode 1, you start to learn about that. You start to see her pictures everywhere, and Max is asking these questions. She's just got no clue. You meet up with Chloe. You go into episode 2. Episode 2 is also kind of about the world building, but now more about characters. You're really starting to learn about Kate. You're starting to figure out, well, what happened? You know, what are these videos? What has she gone through? And then you start to realize, okay, there's a deeper like rabbit hole, right? There's something going on with like drugs and, you know, what happened to her at that party and who's to blame? Was it Nathan? Was it somebody else? And, you know, she's deeply insecure about it. And obviously she's dealing with a lot of complex thoughts. Now you're getting close to Chloe again. You're messing with your powers. You're seeing just kind of how that works. You start to see this doe that seems to be kind of in between realities. Again, the amount of times I think this game hints that Rachel and Max are kind of one of the same, I really believed the rumor at the time that these were the same people. Everybody says that Max reminds them of Rachel. The clothes fit, right? So when Max is walking downstairs to Joyce in the clothes, she calls her Rachel until she stops herself, right? The doe represents both Rachel when it's more of like the pixelated, like kind of in between realities one. That one's Rachel. The actual doe is Max. Butterfly being Chloe, right? Just so much of the game, at least to me, was like Rachel almost disappears to like birth Max back into existence. A really like weird kind of way of doing it, but I think like a beautiful, I don't know, it's definitely something you don't see in a lot of games, right? So that's more of episode 2. You're learning about things. You're starting to put together the mystery. While you also have in the background, like, hey, the end of episode 1, it starts to snow. The ending of all of these episodes, episode 1, beautiful. Episode 2, beautiful. The ending of episode 3, pretty dark, right? Because it's Max seeing Chloe in her state. But, you know, so you're starting to build up, okay, what's going on with the tornado? What's going on with the powers? And then you deal with the Kate stuff. And, you know, again, replaying it, it's interesting to see, like, how it builds fast and slow at the same time, if that makes any sense. Episodes 1 and 2 kind of take themselves very slowly. You just meet all these different people, like Samuel, like what's going on with him? He clearly has some sort of connection to nature and to squirrels, and he knows something's up with you too. He flat out actually tells you that he thinks you're connected to all of it, right? So like you're starting to build up all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it just hits the fast forward button because now you have to save Kate. Now you have to do your first really big just thing, I would say in general, right, in this game, and it's all about choices. That's something else we haven't even really talked about is, you know, there is an illusion of choice because it all comes down to 2 things that you really don't have any control over, right? They just present it. But there are actually plenty of things in this game that will change depending on what you do. It's a lot of setup stuff. It could be a setup leading to David. It could be a setup mainly leading to Kate, at least in episode 2, right? Did you answer the phone with her? Did you comfort her? Did you tell her to go to the cops or not go to the cops, right? All these things will stack. And then even the info you learn about her. Did you even know that she has sisters? Did you know how her mom and dad perceives her? Because you'll only know that if you go in her room and start to look at things. I think it's a very smart system of you can go around and look at everything that you want if you want to. And some of that stuff will actually aid you in the future. Not all of it, not even a ton of it, some of it. And it's kind of selective where you can skip all of it. I think you're missing out on a ton of detail just of the world. Who is Warren, right? Did you go in and did you look at the text messages, not just with characters that are texting you now, did you look at her mom and dad, you know, Max's mom and dad? Did you look at any of this stuff, right? You can get a lot of this game through this exterior, going in Victoria's room and just checking it out, going through Nathan's stuff later on, I think in episode 4 or maybe 3 when you go through his room. Like, you don't have to do some of it you do for like the main mission, but you know, some of it is just totally optional. Some of it will end up haunting you, you know, down the line depending on what you did. And so you save Kate or you don't save Kate. I've saved Kate all but one time. This time I saved her, first time I saved her, I think like my 3rd or 4th playthrough. I don't remember, maybe it was years since I last played it. I was rushing, maybe I didn't do the right things, and I actually didn't. And let me tell you, it's heartbreaking not saving her. It is sad, and that whole scene is just unbelievable. Like sitting in the classroom, and then, you know, I don't remember who it is. It could be Evan that comes in to say like, hey, something's going down. You all leave. She does it, she drops, and you have to rewind time, and then things start to break apart where Max can't control time anymore, and you have to just use your talking skills to undo it. Unreal. And that is the first time, again, I sensed something was up with this game in episode 1. You could sense greatness, right? But then you go into episode 2 and you say, oh my God, they're not playing around. Not only are they doing this time stuff and you got this Rachel stuff and this connection of Chloe and Max, now you're willing to do this kind of stuff. And I didn't even really know if I paid attention to it, all of them. I don't even know if I grasped the themes all that well the first time I played it. But it's like, man, this game is about everything. This game is about bullying and certain S words, let's say, that Kate tried to do. And, just this teenage kind of, not high school drama, but maybe a little bit more advanced than that, right? College drama life, friendship, fate, destiny, all that. It covers a wide spectrum of themes, not just one or two of them. Then, of course, you fast forward to episode 3. It's still about building that Rachel Amber. Now, I guess we focus more on the Rachel thing, right? But it's also kind of about this boil over with Chloe. And this is something that, I kind of remembered, I kind of forgot. I think it's done very organically, where Chloe has just kind of had enough. Episode 3 is probably, I imagine, where people either drew the line on Chloe. You either like her on episode 3, or this is where now you can't stand her, where it's all you do is whine, all you do is complain. And I get that. I definitely get that. I'm a Chloe fan, so I'll stay on that side. But I don't know, just taking everything in, I don't relate to her, but I can see it. She had her life, in a way, at least in the way she perceives it, she had her life stolen. When her dad dies, her world is flipped upside down. And it didn't help that her best friend also wasn't there. She got in with the wrong crowd. And then even when she meets Rachel, again, you don't really have the background of before the storm when you're playing this game, but we kind of saw how that went as well. She's troubled. This is a troubled kid who got into things, had David, who was probably not the best for her at that time, right? And I think they could get along in a perfect world, but definitely not at the time that all that stuff was happening, right? And it just boils over. And she's just had enough of it. In episode, I think what boils it over, right, is when they both go into Frank's RV, and she finds out kind of about this background of Rachel Amber that she never knew about, right? So this person that was very close to her that in a way saved her. I think actually she says that Rachel Amber saved me. And then she finds out, what was she doing with Frank? What was happening? By the way, Frank's another really great kind of complex character. Comes off one way, if you can actually get him talking and, you don't take out his dog, you don't take out him as the game goes, you make all the right choices, he can be a very, friendly, I suppose, but he can also be a very deep character, right? So then Chloe boils over, right? And Max realizes, this is a time where maybe I could do something for my friend here that, maybe she felt betrayed by me, all this stuff years ago. Let's fix this William thing. And I think the game, I know I keep saying, this is another thing that this game does so well. Here's another thing the game does so well. It has a really interesting way of, it's got that line, that thread of the main story from episode 1 all the way through 5, right? I think that main story generally is something's going on with time. They're searching for Rachel, and there's a storm coming, right? But that storm oftentimes gets forgotten. It gets remembered kind of at the end of every episode when Max passes out and stuff, and she sees the vision, then it comes back up. But largely, she's not overthinking it. It doesn't haunt her when she's eating breakfast at the diner. She's not thinking about the vision of the storm, right? But it's there. The main threat and the main thread is always there. But the game does a really good job of pivoting. Kate is an ultimate pivot where it's this was not even part of the game, right? This isn't even a big aspect, quote unquote, of the game, but it is, because it's actually a theme that you're not paying attention to. But the game's got a really great way of deviating without you even, you go along with it. I would say you don't care, but I don't know if that's the right wording. You go along with it, and it can easily kind of bring itself back, even using time travel. The William stuff gets messy. It gets into, okay, well, now Max can jump through pictures and change things, basically change timelines. But now she leaves her body almost. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. She's trapped in that moment. So when she saves William, she's trapped in that moment of time. And then when that's done, she has to jump back to her body. And as we see in episodes 4 and 5, she's like a husk of herself, right, when she's not there. She'll walk with Chloe, she might talk with Chloe and receive info, but she's not really there, and Chloe can even tell that, right? And then when the real Max, almost the time-traveling Max, connects with the body, then she's back, right? So it gets more messy. And, episode 5 messes with time a lot. I don't even think that the rules of time are all that consistent in episode 5. I have a couple issues with it that I don't even know if I'm right, so we won't talk about too much, but it just gets more messy. Episode 3 is kind of the start of that, but it still makes sense. She's going back, she can alter an event, and then she will jump back to the current, where she was, and all of this stuff is going to be different. And then we get, if the Kate thing wasn't big enough for you, then we get the next big thing, which is, okay, save William. That leads to something else happening, and now it's Chloe. And then we get that arc, and it's not very long. It's maybe if it's like a third of episode 4, maybe not even, maybe it's actually less than that. And you go through the Chloe arc and you learn about, okay, well, this is what this family is now dealing with Chloe in her situation. Again, to me at least, because I remember the first time going around looking at the bills, right? These people owe like $10, $12, $15,000. They're behind on stuff. They're mortgaging their house, all this jazz. And again, it's an extra world building thing. And by the way, I know I already said it kind of once, but this entire game, as you're saving Kate, as you're learning that, I guess at this point you haven't really learned the complexities of Nathan. You kind of do. You learn that he's on pills, right? And I think you learned that maybe in episode 4. You start to learn about all these characters, and again, you see the whales, right? You hear about the fishing kind of section of Arcadia Bay. You learn about Two Whales Diner, all this stuff, and you're starting to build that this place, Arcadia Bay, is a character in itself. Blackwell is a character in itself. And they're doing this because it's going somewhere, right? They want to build this connection of this area that's got people in it. Warren's just such a nice soul. Alyssa, she can't get out of her own way, right? She's always getting herself injured or whatever, and Max has to step in. And I just want to keep that in mind, right? Because we're kind of building to episode 5. So you deal with the Chloe stuff, and I thought it was very emotional. I think every time I actually have honored her request and taken her out, let's say. And I think that's kind of the right choice. I mean, she's on her way out. She knows it. The family is in so much freaking debt. They're not... She's going to go anyway, and they're going to keep going more and more into debt. So it's like, if you can end that and go out on Chloe's terms, I think that's kind of the right call, right? And then you get really to the ending of the saga. This is where you find out that Rachel is dead. This is where you go to the Vortex Club party, the end of the world party. Beautiful, amazing. I talked about the music a little bit, but by the way, in the Vortex Club party, the music that's just freaking blaring, so good. It's on this soundtrack. There's a lot of moments of tranquility throughout the entire game. When you're sitting on a tree stump, or you're sitting on a bench, or I think too when Max is on the school bus, right, and she looks outside. Everybody goes to the windows. They see the whale. I think it's the end of episode 2, but the end of episode 1 is kind of similar as well. When it's showing everybody, it's just cutting to like one character after the next, and the music is going on in the background. I think the ending of episode 1 is Obstacles by Sid Matters. So good. The indie rock type soundtrack that this game has is unreal, and it's one of the best. Again, maybe with Kingdom Hearts is like my top 2 of all time. Whether it's the licensed music, like more of these indie artists, or just the music, it's like I mentioned the main menu theme, the guitar, like just a small little guitar riff. It's really not that much, but it's so unbelievably beautiful. I think, again, the visuals kind of combined with the music 24/7 in this game to just make it unreal. You go to the end of the world party, you put it all together. It's actually Jefferson. It's not Nathan Prescott, and your draw again drops. Again, I remember being stunned at the end of episode 3. I remember being stunned at the end of episode 4, and then you get to episode 5, and episode 5 is a trip, right? Episode 5, I was always conflicted on, even when I first played it, where it's like, I think time has been kind to it. I will say that. Replaying it for the 5th time, but even just times 2 through 5. It's very hard to put all of that stuff together, right? You think about when you first play it with episode 1, you think about this wait, you think about 2015, right, as a journey, and it was insane. There was so much they needed to do in episode 5. You had to answer any remaining question. You had to get Max out of the situation. You had to figure out the Chloe thing. You had to do the Storm stuff. You had to do the Jefferson stuff. You had to figure out what happened to Nathan. Shall I continue? It keeps going. And it's about a 2-hour episode. And I think, again, with time as its ally, it's funny that time, right? Obviously, it's such a big theme, but I'm also mentioning the word time quite a bit. Time really has been, I think, good to this game because I really like it. It's very fast. It jumps around a lot, right? It It jumps around also a lot because the pictures, just picture after picture, and she's just destroying these timelines. And she can't stop bleeding, right? Because it's like she is messing with time worse than ever before. But I really like the end kind of results of so much of episode 5. What happens to Jefferson, even the little San Francisco arc, right? Very small, but even like how Max gets pulled back, right? When Chloe calls and the storm is still coming. I don't know why like she wouldn't have invested. See, I think that's a little bit more of like, did they mess up with how time works in that? Because how did she even get pulled back in the first place? Jefferson burns the photos, but I don't really think it works like that because what's done is already done. And then also when Chloe calls, when she's at the art thing, right? And like she never told Chloe that there still is like, did they think the storm was just gone? And it's like, well, was Max like fully aware? Because when she's not there, right, she's not really there. It gets kind of messy. Episode 5 is the messiest of all the episodes, but I think Max in the dark room is sick. And I say sick as in both kind of cool and also very twisted in not a good way, right? Seeing Victoria, learning about, and you kind of get that in episode 4, right? When they break in and they, Nathan has something to do with it, the twisted pictures of Rachel, like what in God's name is going on? It is like, again, in terms of these themes, these dark themes of like what mainly Kate goes through, right? But then you go through some of this stuff of like what Mark Jefferson does to these girls, what Nathan does to these girls. It's insane. Not a lot of games will go there. In fact, very few games will even get close to that kind of stuff. And what's interesting is this game doesn't go all the way. The pictures, because of the art style, they're not revealing, even the pictures of Max, it's like, you get what they're saying. And Max has been through a lot. And Max can get quite emotional when she thinks about what she went through in the dark place. But it never fully goes there. They never outright say things out loud. They never outright show things. But you know what happens in that room. You know other kinds of pictures that Mark Jefferson takes. I think that's where, again, like the themes just kind of elevate, where they're not going all the way, but they also kind of are, and most games won't even get to that point, right? So I want to give them kind of props to that. But I like the resolution. One of my favorite scenes, actually, in this episode is Nathan's phone call, right? When Max is driving to get to the 2 whales, to get to Warren, to get the final picture to kind of stop all of this mess. She gets the call from Nathan, or the voicemail from Nathan, and, he talks about, that he's sorry, and Jefferson's coming after him. He's coming after her next. Like, be careful, he's dangerous. The music that's playing behind her, so beautiful. But Nathan, that ends his complex story because he's dead, right? Jefferson kills him. No matter what, I guess if you chose the Arcadia Bay ending, then Nathan gets arrested, right? If you choose the Chloe ending, most of them are going to die anyway because of the storm, but Nathan was killed even before that, right? Jefferson took him out. And Victoria might have also actually been taken out in that timeline as well. Sometimes they get confused of like how Victoria, or when Victoria actually dies versus not dies. But, then you have the ending. You have the final jump through the picture. You have the nightmare scene, which it gets very internal. The beginning of episode 5 is more about getting out of the predicament, right? And figuring out, just like Jefferson does a lot of exposition. He talks a lot about why he does what he does. He talks about that he's kind of been saying it the whole time. And if you listen to his lectures in any of the episodes where she's in a class with him, he does talk like you can get it if you want. And I love that replayability, where when he's talking about the Daguerrean process, like you can connect it to what he's actually doing behind the scenes, right? It's actually kind of crazy, and I love that about this game. But the beginning is more about exposition, and we got to get Chloe back. Chloe's dead. Like, we have to, before anything, we got to get to a point in time where Chloe is alive. Then we kind of have to fix everything else, and that's what happens, right? So she gets to Warren. I gave him the kiss. I kind of always give him a kiss, where it's like, even if she's not into him, he deserves it. He's such a sweetheart. I can see myself in him. I kind of did, not all the way that what he did, but I can relate, let's just say, to how he acted when I was in my teenage years. So I always give him the kiss. You go through the thing, and you get to Chloe. You go through the nightmare. Then it gets more internal, right? Now it's more about, all right, let's really get to the center of Max, right? She's messing with time. why is she doing it? And, you know, her alternate version is basically saying it's out of, like, the desire to be seen, the desire to be popular. You know, these people, you're doing it to kind of have all eyes on you, and that's really not true. You know what I mean? She talks about Chloe in terms of, like, using her, and, you know, depending on your view of Chloe, you might actually agree. Because Chloe often puts Rachel higher than Max, and Chloe's often comparing Rachel to Max, and almost as like a replacement type thing. That part I could see. The rest of it, it's like, no, Max at her heart, I think, is just a good person, and she's doing the best she can. She never asked for the powers, which I think Chloe says. She doesn't know what she's doing. You know what I mean? She is a good-hearted person, you know, at her core, and she's just trying to do what was right. She saved Kate, you know, and she saved Kate without the powers. I mean, I guess she needed the powers the first time, otherwise she wouldn't have been around, but I love that, though. I love that, you know, more let's look at Max as a character and, you know, going around and having to avoid everybody with the flashlights. I got caught so many times, but I was looking for bottles. I was trying to find everything this time around, so I still think it's rather good. And then you get to the final part. You get just an unbelievable conversation with Chloe. I think it actually is more of like a heart-to-heart if you choose to take her out, if you choose to save Arcadia Bay. The idea of like, don't forget me, Max Caulfield, like things like that. So good. So, I mean, they're such great characters. I know I've recapped while talking about themes. Max is such a great character. It's so well written. Hannah Tell is such a great actress in terms of playing Max. And all of these relationships and communications are so good. Max and Chloe talking at the end there. Max talking to pretty much anybody is very, very good, but it's such a heart-wrenching moment, and then you make the decision and you do what you do. This time around, for the very first time, I actually chose to save Arcadia Bay. Every time before, the first 4 times, I chose to save Chloe. And I really started to look at it a little bit different. I really think the game is nudging you in the direction of saving the town, not Chloe. That's definitely up for interpretation, because you could say, well, you've gone through all this stuff for Chloe, just keep it going. Like, we fought so hard to keep you here, we're not going to let you go now. At the same time, like, you think about the diner nightmare right before, right? And it's like everybody is pleading with you to not let them die. The idea of fate and death. In fact, Chloe mentions that. Maybe it's fate. Maybe I was supposed to die in the bathroom. You saved me. You started. Maybe it was Rachel. Maybe this is Rachel's storm, but maybe it's our storm. Maybe it's because you did that. And that's something that you have to kind of wrestle with in your head. Again, like that kind of idea of defying fate and like saving this best friend, or, you know, a character that you can really grow to love and even be in a romantic relationship with. It's like, you really got to think about that. And I was even asked my wife, like, well, what would you do? Like in real life, like it's a game that sparks those kind of questions when almost no other game, you know, really can do something like that. So I love it. I love both endings. Again, I think the having Chloe go ending is very impactful. It's longer. It's definitely a longer thing. The funeral and having the butterfly land. It's so good, though. So, I mean, both of them are so good. And the one thing I also want to throw in, is, again, we've kind of like recapped and talked about stuff. The gameplay itself, this is a perfect game for the type of thing that it's going for, right? Like, using time to figure out mini puzzles as it goes, I think is great. I think they do it really, really well. Like, knocking something over, and then you have to rewind time and say, okay, do I need to get this chair? Or, you know, what do I have to do to avoid that thing happening? Getting the keys from Frank. Well, if I get him to put it on the table, and then I take it, and I rewind time, I'll still have it in my possession, and he won't have it anymore, but we'll just rewind so he doesn't get mad at me. It's simple, and yet it's very effective. And I think, you know, this walking sim type thing that these games have become known for, I think this game, it falls in that category, but it's also more than that. And I think they maybe even lucked out to an extent because of the powers. Because she has the powers of time, because you can mess around with that, and there's just so much to learn when everything's going backwards in episode 5, right? And you can take a picture by going in the journal, or you can go up to Samuel and he'll actually not be talking backwards. He's the only one that's talking, which is, again, another really cool Easter egg, right? All of these things, they're so complex, there's so many details in it that it doesn't just feel like a walking sim. But again, especially because of how you solve puzzles, sometimes it's not just about, yes, there are times where you move a plank to walk across something, but other times it's about manipulating time in small little puzzles. When William is looking for his keys, you gotta figure it out, and ultimately it's about throwing them out the window, but you might put them somewhere, he'll find them, you have to reverse time and do it again, figure out a different way of like, okay, he can't find those keys, what do I have to do? And so I just wanted to throw it in that Clearly, gameplay is the last thing on anybody's mind when they think of Life is Strange, or any of these type of episodic games. It's not their strength. But this game, I think, does the best, and maybe does more even than a lot of the Telltale games at really, you know what I mean? Like, there's quick time events in Telltale games, so I guess that's kind of how they break it, you know, break you out of it, where you're a little bit more engaged as to what's happening. But a game like this, you are walking around, you are picking a lot of stuff up and reading, and, you know, it's a lot of just, you know, almost paint by numbers. You're just going through the process. But because of the time and because of manipulation and how they do puzzle solving, I think it kind of elevates the game a little bit more. Before we end this video, I just wanted to go over the comments that you guys submitted. Remember, at the end of every month, the game that I cover on Back to the Past, I try to ask anybody that wants to write kind of a story or, you know, whatever they want to say, and I feature it in the video and we talk about it. So let's start from Love Rajit. Maybe I'm saying that right, maybe I'm saying it wrong. This game is the quintessential of narrative-driven games. Definition of a masterpiece. Will never get a game of its caliber again. Life is Strange 1 set the bar for me so high that now sometimes I can't even finish story games because I feel the disconnect and lack of passion in modern games because nothing is Life is Strange caliber of elite storytelling, characters, soundtrack, and setting. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about this, about how I feel, and I feel very close to him at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Somalia 2005, the amount of times I saw this game picture in my Xbox 360 but never played it because I was like 12 is crazy. Jack 8356, I played it already and still have the Xbox One disc. Foo's House says, I really think it hits that millennial angst pretty well. Also, it has amazing indie soundtracks, so much that I bought the version that came with the soundtrack CD later when it came out. Cloudroth says, one of my all-time favorites. Extra love for Max being the same age as me. She was the same age as me as well. We're both 28 or 18, I guess. I saw myself and my friends in a lot of the characters. Chloe Price forever. And Magica 1976, I heard about this on your channel. Well, kept hearing about it. Played this and loved it, and played all the Life is Strange and a few other similar ones. Some parts of the game are so gut-wrenching and makes you go, how on earth do I stop that from happening? Love that some of the choices make you feel uneasy. One of these games where I can get in the story and play it over a weekend, especially in the winter months. I still need to replay and do the version of the ending where you save Chloe, and he also says he still needs to replay it both to platinum it and remind himself of the events before Double Exposure is released. Applerski says, well, we've talked about this privately, but my first time playing it was earlier this year. It was in my backlog for like 9 years. I'm actually glad I waited because I got 4 games to play back to back. Once I started the first, I don't think I played another game until I had the platinum for all 4. Then shortly after Double Exposure was announced, and I couldn't be more excited. My question for you is, are you waiting till next year to drop this vid? Because 2025 will be 10 years, right? That's exactly what we have done. Elvis says, the last episode was such a disappointment for me. Either you save the town or that's it for everybody. But that means you have to undo literally everything you have fought for in the game so far. Go back to the beginning and let Chloe walk to her doom. Made me feel like I had wasted my time with the game and don't think anyone likes that. They could have really done a better job there. I want to talk about that in particular. I think that's a really interesting comment. But the final one, and it's fitting we end on this, Meme Sauce 9410. I know I'm in the minority, like in the 1%, but I did not like this game whatsoever. Chloe in particular is terrible. She doesn't have any redeeming qualities, and it's like they knew that because they throw a what if she was disabled appeal for emotion halfway through. David was legit the best character, and they spend most of the game making you hate him. So I mean, to the first couple comments, I very, very much agree in terms of the impact, and it's cool to see, right, that impact spread. This is a game, you know, I didn't even mention this in the rest of the video. This is a game that just did so well. It's not all about sales, okay? I'm not trying to say it like that, but, you know, I think it's just an extra kind of layer where this game, there's a reason why it's stuck around. There's a reason why Max is so popular. There's a reason why Double Exposure is even happening, and it's that the first game not just made an impact on people's lives, but also sold like unreal. You know what I mean? Like that, obviously that really helped. But I do want to talk about the last couple comments because I think, you know, it's good to challenge. It's good to challenge the opinion here. So to Elvis's comment, I get it. And I think when I first played it, like we talked about, like, you know, that was a very divisive ending, and I think the internet was kind of outraged. One thing that I realized upon replaying it just now, and the thing that I'm taking from it going forward to like Double Exposure, is it all did happen. I think that is the most important thing to think about. Not saying you have to, right? But how I think of it, and it's stated, you know, it's stated in the game. Max lives it all. Max goes through the whole thing. And you know, if you save Chloe, you know what I mean, you do lose everybody, but I think that's just the choice. The build-up is Chloe or everybody and the characters of the world that you just built throughout the entire game, right? So it's a real dilemma there in which you choose. Now, if you choose Arcadia Bay, you technically, in terms of the timeline, you never did that stuff with Warren. You never saved Alyssa from getting hit into the pool, right? You never did that stuff. But Max actually did. And that's stated in the game, even when she technically doesn't go through the Jefferson stuff, she does. Even when she doesn't go through, whatever, she actually does in her head. She does, well, not even necessarily in her head, kind of like a fraction of her being did experience those events, even though in a way they didn't happen. Does that make sense? So, I get it. And again, that's what makes the ending so, at the time, very divisive, and people flat out hated it, right? People really, really hated the ending. But how I look at it now is it really builds up the themes of destiny and fate and pitting your best friend, the one that you fought for so long, along with the town that you're such a, now you're such a big fan, and you've lived it. You've lived the town. You understand what makes it its own thing, and now you have to choose. But as to the events, even if Max sits there in the bathroom, which, by the way, is depressing enough, right? She sits in the bathroom, she lets Chloe die. Not just does she have to live with that, but she actually did everything else. She still was in the darkroom. Mark Jefferson still drugged her. She still did the Kate thing. She still found Rachel Amber's body with Chloe. That stuff did happen to her. It didn't really happen to anybody else, but it happened to like a different part of her, through almost time. Well, it literally was, right? Through time travel, she experienced those events, and in a way, right, by a connection, we experienced those events. Those things did happen to us too because we played as Max, right? So again, I think it's a really interesting question, but that's how I think of it. But that's a deep rabbit hole, right? And then again, to end it with the meme sauce ones, did not like this game. Hey, certain games are just not going to hit, with some people. I don't think there's anything wrong. The Chloe part tour, the Chloe part, we talked about that a little bit earlier. I think she was just dealt a bad hand. The David thing is interesting. I think it's just the David thing is a real big red herring. We again, actually, I didn't really talk about David much in this video. We talk about the complexities of Nathan and Jefferson and all, well, really maybe Nathan, Victoria, Kate, right? These characters. David too. David is a very complex character, and he's going through a lot of stuff. They frame him, right? Like he's surveilling all of this stuff, and it's putting him in a very, very bad light. And I will say this, they never fully go all the way to like implicate him. There's one time when you go into the dark room in episode 4 where there's like the stocked up food, and Max will mention David, like, oh, this is like the food that David has in the garage, and that's the only time they even remotely hint, like, there's something up with him because of the surveillance, and he pushes Kate. That's not cool because of obviously what can happen to Kate after that. But like there is that one time where it's like, could it be him? Is it Nathan? Maybe you suspect Jefferson, but maybe you don't. But is it Nathan or is it David, right? But yeah, David is pit against Chloe. He's pitted against Max, and you see a lot of the nasty elements of him. But I actually, I mentioned earlier, I really like a lot of the resolutions in episode 5. Jefferson's resolution, Nathan's resolution with the phone call, so all that stuff, right? David's resolution is really, really good too. I actually really don't like the version where he kills Jefferson, right? If you tell him that Chloe is dead and he shoots and all that stuff, there's just so much rage and like hopelessness, like giving up, and I don't like that. I actually can respect that that's like one of the outcomes you can choose, but I actually like to do the one where you lie and you say, Chloe's out there, and she went to do things, let's say, for YouTube, right? And just the way that David reacts, and he truly, I guess you get some of that if he does do the thing to Jefferson, right? Because he says like how much he did care about Chloe, love her, and he doesn't get to tell her that, he doesn't get to show her that anymore, and it's actually very depressing and very sad. But I like the version where he, you lie to him basically, and you kind of get that hope from him, right? So I think he is a really good character. He does get that short end of the stick because of like the red herrings and trying to like throw you off with like, well, what is he up to? Because he's doing the stuff with Kate, he's monitoring Max even, like he's not amazing at his job either, right? It's because of the war and because of the trauma and all that stuff that he faced and whatnot, but it throws you off on who David really is. All in all, an amazing game. I'm really glad I made this video, but I don't think I've ever talked so succinctly in any of the videos I've done for so long. I love this game. I truly love this game. It impacted me the second I played it. I was waiting day by day, for episode 2, then episode 3, 4, 5, and there's just very few games that have done this to me. Again, like I talk about like a top 5 list, or I talk about some of my favorite games of all time. And look, a lot of the games, you know, when I made the video on Prototype is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's very special to me, and it's special to connect me to the PS3 and that generation. This game just really got me on every level. Like I felt, you feel different when you play this game. And, you know, I mentioned in the beginning that not only is this a game that comes to mind when you say, if you could wipe your memory and replay a game, you know, this game is on a lot of those lists. But also, this is one of those games where when you beat it, you're kind of lost. You're kind of lost, and you kind of think, what game can do that to me? And that is when I believe that I've played a special game. Above all else. I just did that this year with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I know people were very divisive on that game, but stay with me just in terms of this theme here. When I play a game, and I played, say, Final Fantasy, when you walk away from it, when you can't stop thinking about it, when you, for me, content creation, when I make videos on it, but in my head and in my heart, right, for weeks, I'm just thinking about Rebirth. For months, for years, I'm thinking about Life is Strange. You don't do that with every game. A lot of games you play, they can be great times. I've spent tens of hundreds of thousands, no, probably not hundreds, tens of thousands of dollars on games in my life. So many of them I'm fine with. I'm fine with the experience. I play it, I like it, maybe even love it. But do I really, right? Because does it stick with you? A lot of games don't stick with you. And I'm not saying Life is Strange sticks with everybody, but how I know that this is one of the most important games of my life, and this is one of those games that just is one of my favorite games of all time, is when I beat it, I can't let it go. I look at other games and I say, you can't compete with Max. You can't compete with the story. You can't compete with the themes or the characters. You just don't. And, I mean, some games can, right? Like, I have a couple games that I think are, like, legendary games, but that kind of feeling of, like, and maybe it's more a depressing feeling, to be honest with you, that feeling of, like, being lost, where it's like, what do I do now? That only happens to me, specifically me, when I play a game and it's just, it changes your life so much, or it does something to you, and it makes that impact that almost no other game can do. When I beat Persona 5, I had the same thing with the cast. Where is there a game that has a cast as good as Persona 5? There's like maybe 20 games in the entirety of all games that can match that. So what do you do? What do I do after I play a Sly Cooper or Kingdom Hearts 2 or things like that? Uncharted. There's just games that don't reach it. And Life is Strange is one of them. There is no other Max Caulfield. There is no other game that blends and balances the themes of Life is Strange. The time travel stuff, the music, the visuals. This game is almost, I don't ever want to say perfect. I'm sure I did in this video, but the game is a masterpiece, and the game is almost perfect, like all the way around. There's just so many like 9.99s out of 10 from every aspect of this game, and even the weakest elements. Episode 5 being messy, the ending boiling it down to 2 decisions. I've really forgiven those gripes, and not to say they're not valid, but I really think time has been kind, where I almost understand it more. The game really was building to that the whole time. I didn't see it originally, but you see it now, where it's like, it kind of was always gonna be Chloe, something with Chloe, this theme of saving Chloe versus not. It was always gonna be that since episode 1, and I didn't see it. And I think a lot of people didn't see it, but now you can. So I can be mad about it, or I could kind of, I'm not saying, again, you don't have to do either of these, but I understand it more now. I think I get what they were going for, and I can respect that. So there you go. I think the longest video I've made on Back to the Past. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, this was really, really fun, to be honest with you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all on the next one.